economist and the CEO of Preston Fintech. Greetings to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for inviting me. I hope we have a fruitful conversation today, and thanks my co-panelists for joining as well.
We look forward to fruitful conversations. We should reiterate, this program is all about elucidating the African population with matters that are affecting Africa and, of course, proposing solutions. Before we dive right into discussions, let's welcome this report done for us by Lumshun a bit to comprehend. Just to recall that recently a court in Malindi actually prohibited the police there in Kenya from violence or acting violently on protesters. Let's get this report, then we shall be right back to commence our conversation.
Kenya's High Court Judge Justice Mugere Thande has, in a ruling on Friday, June 28, barred the National Police Service NPS from using extreme force during demonstrations, stating that the police have thereby been prohibited from employing water cannons, tear gas, live ammunition, rubber bullets or other harsh measures against protesters. The decision follows a petition filed by lawyer Saitabao Ole Kanchori. According to Justice Thande, the petitioner has demonstrated that it is in the public interest that the order sought are granted. Justice Thande further ruled that the police should not use brutal force or any form of violence against protesters. The court, in addition, issued an order prohibiting the police from committing extrajudicial killings, arrests, abductions, detentions, harassment, intimidation, torture, or any cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment of protesters. In the petition, Kanchori argued that the police had resorted to arbitrary arrest and illegal abductions of protesters, along with intimidation and harassment. He noted that the police have been violating the protesters' right to liberty and their inalienable freedom from torture. Kenyans, especially the youth, have been on the streets since last week protesting against the Finance Bill 2024, which comprises several tax hikes and its passage this week in Parliament. Although President William Ruto withdrew the bill on Wednesday due to pressure, protests continued on Thursday across various towns in the country. The protests have resulted in significant property destruction and loss of lives, which have been attributed to the excessive force used by the police while confronting the protesters. Meanwhile, Azimio La Umoja One Kenya Alliance has threatened to move to the International Criminal Court (ICC) over the alleged atrocities during the anti-finance bill protests. Speaking on Friday after visiting victims of the chaos at the Kenyatta National Hospital, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka stated that the alleged actions by the police during the protest call for immediate action from the ICC. He also challenged President William Ruto to speak out against the killings.
Thank you, Lumshu, for the report. Ladies and gentlemen, like we mentioned, we discuss in Kenya. Now, I'll kickstart with you, faithfulness. Now, given the ongoing situation in Kenya and several persons have been killed since a protest began in the nation last week, what is next for the nation amidst the ongoing or persistent protest?
Thank you so much, Sharon. I think our rallying call has been about rejecting the finance bill of the 2024. Amid the proposal that was from the National Treasury to, that is the National Treasury through its committee to the Committee of Parliament, that is the Finance Committee, that is the Budget and Finance Committee in Parliament, was supposed to collect views from people, and much as there was public participation, Kenyans were dissatisfied with the proposals from the Treasury, and of course the Treasury originates from the executive, that is the cabinet. I think thereafter there was an uprising. There hasn't been a bill such as this that has ever elucidated a lot of emotions in terms of fiscal policy of the country. We saw a situation where a lot of people were able to read the document and understand what the country is going to grapple in. And I think the reason why the Kenyans were really tired because of these finance bill, it's because of the previous finance bill that was in 2023 that proposed the introduction of a housing levy, much as it went through court process, being halted by the court several times. the government found a way of imposing it fully on people, much as people were not satisfied with it. And now the government, much as it had not earned the trust of the people, came in with this 2024-2025 finance bill that, of course, the government was trying to push it, especially now the ruling government, because it had the majority in parliament. And the people in the country, especially the young people, were tired because, one, we're seeing a situation where you are budgeting for money and trying to hike, let's say, the levies and taxes on products. And as a country, we're experiencing turmoil. We're experiencing a situation where there are no jobs. People are very unemployed. There are very many pending bills by people who have done jobs with the government. There is a lot of corruption in government. There is a lot of pending bills. You find that even the president and the cabinet secretaries and the members of parliament, those guys who are in top positions, that is the public service, who are in the public service, they loot money and shove it in our faces, buy expensive things, and it's a fallacy such that they're like, what are you going to do about it? And people got tired about it. And that is the reason why people hit the streets, because you can't tell us that a country doesn't have money, but the same time on Sunday, you go to churches, donate almost 20 million Kenya shillings. That is almost like $200,000, which is public money. And you fly around with the helicopters, you use public, that is taxpayers' money for your personal gains. And that is what really rattled Kenyans. And these things started just as a conversation on Twitter. It started as a conversation on Twitter. People started planning to go for protest that was supposed to be on Tuesday the other week. People went for it. We saw the first arrests. We saw unlawful abductions. And we saw the police using excessive force because people were trying to protest. And the more they did this, the more it spread. And we found that now when we went to the streets the other week on Thursday again, that was when there was a very big number of people who came to the streets. Now the conversation moved from Twitter, it went through Kenyans, it went to, that is TikTok, to Facebook, to Instagram. You saw a lot of young people coming out, even parents now giving the young children, the young adults consent to go to the streets to demonstrate, because this is our life and this is what we have. And now thereafter, we saw our friends being abducted. We saw many of us being afraid of now have to go under and hide, because we don't want to get abducted, because when you get abducted, you're never presented in a court of law and you're just found somewhere, and of course it's traumatizing. And I think one of the reasons is people are coming out of the streets is because of these abductions, this brutality by the police, these killings. And you find that right now people are even tired. They're no longer thinking about the rejecting the finance bill, because much as the government, that is led by the president, promised to withdraw the bill itself from, he's not going to consent the bill, he's sending it back to parliament. But yes, you find that much as he sent it back to parliament, there's
a decision will still have to be made. Anyway, I'll be coming back to you, Faithfulness, with regards to your response. Yes, I can. I'll be coming back to you shortly with regards to your response for us to elaborate more on your point of discussion. But then I'd like to take Dr. Stanley FONGOD right away. Now, being an economist, observing what is ongoing in Kenya, how do you think the finance bill that was rejected by President William Samoei Ruto would affect the economy? And of course, now that the bill has been rejected, do you think that, or what is the future of this said bill, given that the members of parliament are expected to meet come July 23?
I think that the history of, the finance bill in Kenya, especially based upon the fact that there was one in 2023, which was heavily contested, and then now in 2024, and the one in 2023 was not, presented as amicable as it ought to have. And then in 2024, they came out with this other bill. I understand the economic policies that, the government is trying to enact. That, we can disagree to agree on a whole lot of other issues, but the presentation of that particular bill and the fact that there were other things that could have been done to be able to raise even more than 2.7 billion, in revenue based upon taxation, that was something else that I, basically scratched my head as to why, the government decided to go that route. You cannot basically increase value-added taxes on, on folks who barely, are making a living, and you're increasing taxes on folks who basically have nothing. All right, the middle class in Kenya is absolutely disappearing, and so the wealth gap in Kenya, it's between those who have and those who do not have, has tremendously increased. And any society where the middle class basically dissipates, will obviously, lead in some kind of anarchy. And so when you see folks protesting on the street, it's gone beyond, all right? It's no longer just about the issues of the finance bill. This is a clarion call for those who basically want to see reforms in the country, reforms, with the way, especially to address the issues of corruption, and also reforms right now, maybe on the issues of police brutality, which is too quite often, the case in most African countries and even in the West.
Exactly. We shall be coming back to address this issue of police brutality, which you've evoked carefully well. Now, back to you, Joshua. You earlier on mentioned that some persons continue going down to the streets because they are fighting for better good, something that is more than just the finance bill. Now, how did Kenya welcome this recent court declaration that was prohibiting the police from using violence on those that were protesting?
I think one thing we're really grateful for is we have courts that really amplify the rule of law. We do have the Law Society of Kenya that is really, really prudent in making sure that the rule of law is followed by the police. And this is not the first time that we're experiencing police brutality and everything. I think Kenyans are happy by how the courts have been standing out firm. And you can look at the scenes that have been happening. Yesterday, we had a lot of killings, even children, somebody being lodged with 7 bullets in their body, and it was just tragic. And people are really tired with the government, and not really the government, but the people who are in government and the type of police brutality. You find that even the police are being unmasked. They're being unmasked by the public. That these are the people who are really causing brutality on innocent protesters. People who have no arms. They only have masks, water bottles, and hashtags, and their phones. And you find that is the Independent Police Oversight Authority doesn't do anything to these rogue cops. You find that cops are walking around with guns, brandishing guns, who are in civilian, and they are terrorizing. That is like terrorizing Kenyans. And that is the cause of all these mess. And the more the police rattle Kenyans, the more these Kenyans want to come out. Because just as I told you, right now it's no longer about rejecting the finance bill, but Kenyans really want proper governance. They really want, I think majority of Kenyans want proper governance, want the rule of law to be followed. And you can highlight even at the things yesterday when the Kenya Army was deployed to at least hasten peace in the country. You find that people were celebrating while they were working with the Kenya Army. So you find that literally Kenyans don't have a problem with the police. They don't have a problem with the Kenya KDF. They only have a problem with people who are causing brutality. And that is what we are trying to make it right. And that is why you find that we are standing for our own. And the reason why many of the people will be coming out on the streets next week, that is on Tuesday and Thursday. The people are saying there's going to be a national holiday. It's to champion for proper governance, to say that we want all these police who are causing all this brutality, causing this maiming, causing these abductions to stop, and let them be prosecuted in a court of law. And we want justice for the people who were killed, because deaths right now are really alarming. The government is trying to suppress the numbers, and we want the people who have been injured to be justice to be done on behalf of them. And that is what we Kenyans do really want. Right now, it's no longer about how you're going to live or anything. It's all about the best of the interest of Kenyans. We want our generations to move forward. So that is what the conversation is going on the street right now. And the fact that the president is trying to find a way of trying to get back to now we the young people. And you find that even the political parties, because the government believes that the political parties hold the mandatory, the key to now, let's say, the young people. But you find that these young people are tribeless, they are partyless, they don't even care about where you come from, but they do care about policies of this country. They do care about the decisions that are being made in this country. So you find that no political party can take credit of the masses that came to the streets or what people are championing for. And this is a rallying call for Kenya that we want a fresh new start. We want a new country. We want things to be followed. We want the rule of law to be followed. We want the government to be accountable. We want fairness. We want equality. And that is what the rallying call of each Kenyan. We just want a free environment, free of malice, free of everything, and just a rule of law. And that is what Kenyans right now are advocating for.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Now to you, Dr. Stanley. Reports has it that the motive behind this protest could be in a bid to deeply ingrain corruption and misgovernance. Now, being an expert, or better still, a Pan-Africanist, with what you call panelists has said so far, why do you think that these protests in the East African nation do persist, or they persist amidst all attempts to call them down?
Well, you see, the issue we are facing here, it's not just something that is restricted to Kenya. I think that if you look across the African continent, you will see this in almost every nation, just that the protests have not started yet, but they will. If you know human nature, it's just a matter of time before folks get tired, of basically being marginalized and put into a place where their voices are absolutely not being heard. What is absolutely painful so far as Kenya is concerned is the whole entire issue that Kenya was looked upon, as a beacon of hope so far as democracy is concerned, in the Eastern African bloc. Unfortunately, that has died. Once you restrict people from absolutely voicing out their opinions, then you are doing the same thing, which is anti to the very tenet of democracy: freedom of speech, freedom of expression, that folks have the capacity to be able to show up in the public arena and then make sure that their voices are being heard without the fear of being persecuted, and unfortunately in the case of Kenya, or being killed by the police, or whoever it is that is carrying out this extrajudicial killing. We have to be able to do whatever it takes to make sure that we allow people to show up in the public arena and allow them to be able to voice their opinion and respect their opinion. Let there be public dialogue in ways that we can actually be able to have our policies mirror image the real situation that the country is experiencing. On the other hand, I also want to be able to state this clearly: you cannot destroy public property, in the name of protest. That is absolutely, it's crazy. You cannot destroy the very thing that you're fighting to protect, because if you are going against somebody who is setting up the policies, who is entrenched in corruption, the buildings, all right, the infrastructure that is of Kenyans, all right, is not responsible, for the malice that is being projected by those who you're trying to fight against. So the notion about destroying public property, that's something that should be condemned across the continent. There are a few things that needs to be done. First of all, I think that on the economic front, what Ruto was trying to do and his administration, they went too far. I think that there was an overreach, but there is a component of that particular bill that has to do with making sure that companies that came into Kenya, made money into Kenya, all right, do not take that money outside of Kenya, and if they had to take that money outside of Kenya, let them be heavily taxed. The problem with that is this: the moment you start taxing any company, it doesn't matter wherever you're taxing them, they have no problem with your taxes. All they do is just pass that to the consumer. So the local person who is basically buying the end product is the one that absolutely suffers. So there has to be a way in which the government comes out with policies that will incentivize foreign companies, VCs, from being able to invest that money back into the community, be more involved in projects that will eventually bring about job growth and job creation within these communities, rather than just coming up with the whole entire idea of tax. We cannot tax ourselves into prosperity. You can't tax yourself into freedom. You can't tax yourself into job creation. You can never tax yourself, into paying any debt. That does not work. You basically have to create an environment where there is real prosperity. A GDP of about 120 billion US dollars. We are looking about an increase of about 5.7% in 2024, which is basically up about, if you look at sectors like the agricultural sectors, maybe up about 6.5% in 2023. The idea is this: we have to be able to look, at ways of basically having a positive trend, a positive outlook so far as the economy is concerned. And one of the things we need to also understand is this: when there are protests and mass protests, VCs, foreign direct investors are not coming in, venture capitalists are not looking at the country. There is therefore no money for young entrepreneurs to be able to invest in the marketplace. And what that means is, there's no spell of economic growth. So sustained economic growth is important as long as there is some kind of stability, so far as the nation is concerned. That's something, every protester must have in mind.
Exactly, Dr. Stanley FONGOD. I'll be coming back to you to see how we can address the issue of protests on the African continent. But then, Josh, what do you share the same opinion as a co-panelist?
I'd like to, I won't share the same sentiments in terms of destruction of property. Let me just highlight on the issue about destruction of property, especially in Kenya. I've been in every protest. Personally, I've been a victim of a protest. Actually, I lost my phone during a protest. Somebody snatched it from me. And I can tell you for a fact that the young people who stepped into the streets, these are young people. You find that somebody who's 18 years, 19 years, 20 years, personally I'm 20, 21 years. You find that we, the young people, would really take care of each other. You'd not want to see, you'd not see any young person going to loot somebody's property or try to destroy things. And I can tell you for a fact that I've been in all the protests. The only protest that went way higher was yesterday's and on Tuesdays this week. Last week was a proper peaceful protest until the police decided to shoot people and resulted into 2 killings and the brutality. Now, on Tuesday and yesterday's protests, we saw goons. Actually, we saw a rampant number of goons now taking over the demonstrations, that is in the evening, with the aim of hurting business people. Remember, these are the same business people who are also on the streets with us. And remember that we, the young people who are in this protest and this demonstration, would really care about my brother. I wouldn't want to see them lose their business. I wouldn't want to see him lose his capital or lose his materials or whatever he sells in his or her shop. So you find that there are people who are architects of chaos. You find that there are people who want to use this protest to benefit themselves. And I lay blame specifically on politicians who have selfish interests. And you can look at how the conversation has been between, let's say, the opposition and the government. And with the young people, especially when we hold our Twitter spaces, and which always has a very huge number, almost like, yes, the other day it almost had 100,000 people joining in, actually more than 100,000 people joining in. And what the message was, we as we walked into the streets, we only have our water bottle, we only have our masks, and we have our handkerchiefs. And that is only our weapon. We are not going to throw things at people, we are not going to destroy property. But and we told the opposition leaders, I remember even we told the politicians that kindly don't get into these demonstrations. We don't want anarchy, we don't want problems. You guys are just the same, we just want accountability. And now that everything is happening, you find that there are people who are architects of chaos. They pay some goons so that they can come destroy properties in town, loot shops, which is not right. And I won't support any destruction of property. You can't tell me that all the protests we've had from the other week are successful, and during the day, everything is fine, until when it gets to almost like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. is when there is now rampant looting in shops. And you find that when this rampant looting in shops happens, the police themselves do not try to protect these shops, but rather they want to harm innocent citizens. So there's a problem. The police need to identify that they are goons and they are peaceful protesters. There's no point of harming an innocent person than and leaving these goons loot shops and stuff, which doesn't sit right with us. And this is a rallying call to every other Kenyan and every other person who is even going to these demonstrations. Kindly take care of other people's property, take care of yourself, and take care of the people who are around us. And I can tell you for a fact that every other moment, personally for me, when it gets to 4 p.m., almost 4:30, during the day when we start the protest, that is the demonstrations in the morning, I always head home because I know now that is the time the anarchists try to step in. And every other moment when we go home, almost at 4 to 4:30, we always ask people on our socials, that is on Twitter and Facebook, we just plead with them just to go home, because we know these anarchists want to ride on this wave so that they can cause chaos. And of course, these politicians would just want to bring these goons so that they can paint now the Gen Zs, because we are called our Gen Z revolutions, that we people are chaotic, we don't value other people. And now that is not something we want. We want a peaceful Kenya, because this is our country. We respect institutions, but we are not going to back down when we see people in these institutions throw tantrums on us, insult us, and use public resources to intimidate us or something. We are not going to back down on that. So right now and forward, and you find that even on Tuesday when people are marching to Parliament, I can tell you for a fact, the reason why people were marching to Parliament, it was supposed to be a peaceful protest. But now the problem was when the police started shooting people with live bullets, shooting, there were some snipers who were on top of the Parliament building, and the opposite KICC tower. There were snipers there who were shooting people. And that is what caused all these problems, that people now decided to get into Parliament and destroy things in Parliament. And you find that the MPs did not listen to the people, because they are supposed to be people representatives. They are not supposed to be executive representatives. They're supposed to listen to the people. But now the people were enraged. They just wanted to get these parliamentarians out of that office, because they don't want to listen to us. They never listen to us. So that is the reason why people decided to get into Parliament. And I think thereafter, that is when the government backed down and decided that it's going to hear us. And that was what was happening, because our main purpose from way before was rejecting the finance bill and occupying Parliament, because we are telling these parliamentarians that, look, you're you're not leaders, but rather you are our representatives. And that is the kind of Kenya we want. And looking forward, that is where we want to go, and this is what we want to do. So that is plainly what the snippet of what I can highlight based on these demonstrations and picketing.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua, for your very insightful contribution. Now, to you, Dr. Stanley FONGOD, earlier on you mentioned that Kenya could find or could sort other ways through which it could raise the approximately $2.7 billion that was supposed to be gotten through tax in the finance bill. Now, being an economist, and earlier on we mentioned in our preamble that the country's public debt at the moment stands at over 10 trillion or 10 billion Kenyan shillings. With these amounts of public debt, what other measures can the government put in place so it doesn't crumble its economy?
There has to be a way in which we do whatever it takes on the African continent as a whole to prevent, us from borrowing, money for things that we absolutely have no reason borrowing money for. Most of the debts that we owe on the African continent, it is not just, restricted to Kenya. If you look across the African continent, you ask ourselves, why are we owing the money? Because the reason to which the money was, borrowed in the first place has never been materialized. So most of the money that has been borrowed on the African continent, has literally taken flight right out of the continent into Swiss banks, into the Cayman Islands, with shell companies where people, in that capacity hide their money. The reality is we have to become a little bit more responsible, especially when it comes to our borrowing. And again, I'm thinking that when you look at exactly what Ruto was trying to do, especially trying to vote to make sure that we bring down the national debt, because, as much as the protesters goes out on the street, which I understand exactly why, but the truth of the matter is we still have this much money, in terms of the national debt that we need to be able to deal with. And as long as that is not being taken care of, we will keep borrowing against that money because we basically need to keep the nation functioning. Put aside the issues of corruption, put aside, the issues of mismanagement, and just deal with this on economic terms and ask yourself, what country do you want to live in when you have a national debt that keeps soaring up? Because eventually, the currency of the country will become, insolvent, and that will be the problem when you just keep increasing, the debt ceiling just keeps rising every single time. We just keep borrowing, we push it up. We borrow, we push it up. That becomes a major problem. I said earlier on, there has to be mechanisms in which we put into place to make sure that we prevent, that from happening. First of all, if you look at the economy of Kenya, there's good things happening within this economy. It's a tech hub for Africa. That's the beauty about, Kenya. It's a tech hub for the whole entire continent. I think it's better than what's happening in South Africa. It's superior to what's happening in Nigeria, and that says a lot. So, and that also means that there's a lot of other companies that are coming in as a result of that. There's a whole industry that has spurred up in Kenya as a result of that. What that means also is this: most of these foreign companies, when they come in, even though you're looking at about 5.something% of the GDP, that's a lot of money. Most of the companies, when they come in, they make money with Kenyans, and then there's, capital flight. They just take the money and then they leave the countries with it, or, out of the borders, and spend the money outside of the borders of Kenya. But that is a lot of money that has been generated, at the local level, and we're just taking the money out. We have to find ways in which we prevent or we allow people to be able to reinvest that particular money as part of the requirements for them to be able to come in. That says, if you're going to do business in Kenya, let's say 40% of your revenue or 40% of the profit you make in Kenya needs to be able to be, you have to invest 40% of that money back into Kenya. Why not 60%? And then you can only take 40% out. Why don't you put up a mandate that says that, okay, they have to be some kind of a local partnership? Most countries in Europe, in Europe and in the Middle East do this. You cannot own anything in Dubai except there's somebody of that nationality. That you cannot do same in the Philippines except you have a Filipino who is into partnership with what you're doing. If that was going to be the case, that significantly lowered the amount of money that basically leaves the country, because we need that money to be able to invest.
Dr. Stanley, you're looking at
Yes.
Measures that will impact the economy, but looking at the African context per se, how sustainable will such measures be?
What measures precisely?
The measures on, say, country or investors or those that are coming to invest in the country. For instance, Kenya, which you cited so well, say investing about 60%. We're looking at an example and taking out 40%. How feasible or how sustainable would that be, looking at the African context?
It's worked in the Philippines, it's worked, in the Middle East, in Africa, guaranteed it's going to work. The reason is because, first of all, you have to understand this. Everybody wants to be able to invest their money somewhere. And the first thing they're looking for is stability, all right? And so once you have a country that is stable and they know that when they bring the money, they'll be able to at least get the money back, that's a good thing. Everybody will want to be able to invest on the African continent. The continent is so vast. Number one, the market is really large, especially when you start thinking about bringing down our borders. We're talking about a very huge economy collectively as a continent. If we are able to allow VCs companies to partner with local companies, foreign companies to partner with local companies in the country, that will be better off than us just allowing them to come in and then invest their money and then carry their money and leave, and then we now say, oh, wait a minute, you cannot take all of that money out. You need to do something with it. That has to be on contract basis on day one. If you're trying to do business in this country, pick up a Kenyan. Partner with the Kenyan. If you're trying to do business in this country and you're not going to partner with the Kenyan, know that you must invest 60% or 40%, of your profit back into Kenya. We will not allow you to take that money out. You either say yes or you say no. And believe me, there's a lot of folks who will want to be able to do that. First of all, it's if you look at statistically, the amount of companies that have failed, foreign companies invested in other companies that have failed, when they have partnered with local partners, has been extremely very small. The percentage basically holds sway and promotes more, partnership investments in countries rather than you just coming all by yourself and then trying to run things by yourself. So to be a safe investor, it's always good to be able to have some kind of a local partner on ground who understands the culture, understands the people, know exactly what it takes to be able to set up what you're trying to set up, and then you guys can be able to create that partnership. This will be a win-win situation for the African continent, and believe me, it works.
Exactly, Dr. Stanley. Now, back to you, Joshua. We earlier on mentioned that the protest continues to persist as a result of mismanagement or misgovernance, or better still, what's happening in Kenya. But then, looking at the current economy at the moment, what can you tell us is the current state of affairs as of now with regard to, say, the current pressure on the economy, because we have analysts that have the opinion that the bill could have affected or choked the economy of Kenya. What's your view on that?
First of all, I'll start by saying that I think the government, the country of Kenya doesn't have a problem with collecting revenue. It has a problem with expenditure, okay? Because a lot of money that is collected from the taxpayer, if we collect almost like $100 from the revenue from the taxpayers, around 60% goes into debt servicing. The other goes into paying, that is wage bill, that is the government workers, that is the wage bill, and little money goes into development. And we Kenyans don't have a problem with being taxed. The problem is how that money is being used. And the main question Kenyans have been asking is, yes, much as we're paying this debt, we are asking for public accountability on this debt. We want to know who do we owe, how much do we owe, because we just wake up one day and we hear that we've gotten a loan from this facility. We don't know how that money was appropriated.
Absolutely.
We can say that the economy has been on an upturn. That is one thing I can say for sure. But the problem is you can feel it from on a theoretical perspective, but Kenyans really outside on the streets would tell you that they don't have money in their pockets. It's no longer the situation they used to be before. They say that they don't have money in their pockets. Literally, you'd feel it because one, there's minimal or no jobs. Some of the companies are closing down just because of some gruesome, let's say, tax measures and business environment. And I think the government has been trying to curb on that. But the problem is when they continue to put on these crazy measures, especially trying to introduce excise duty on all those sort of stuff, it really reduces on companies that are able to employ people, because not everybody is going to be employed by the government. And not many people, a lot of people, of course, have small and medium enterprises. And the people who feel the brunt of the economy are the people who are in the small and medium enterprises. So the call has been that literally let there be a good business environment for everyone. Let there be a good environment where you're able to use money. You don't have to take money, give me money on the right and take it on the left. It's a very sinister move. So personally, I do have hope that the country of Kenya is able to move forward, and it's only going to move forward until when we are going to have accountability. And I can tell you for sure that if the president is able to reduce on expenditure, especially from his office, from the executive to the legislature, it's able to live. We Kenyans are able to live within our means, and the people are going to work hard. Are going to work because literally, I can tell you for sure, Kenyans are the most hardworking people. They don't have a problem with working. They have a problem with how the government is taking money away from them, because we have a lot of levies. We do have a lot of expenditure. So much as we can say that we have a president who has a vision for the country, it's only the people who advise him are out of touch with reality. And we just want accountability. We want to live in a situation that we all are okay. We want corrupt people charged and taxpayers' money reverted back. And that is what we want. And the only time we're able to have systematic approach, we're going to have the rule of law being followed. People, theft and wanton wastage, the people who are held, the people who are found culpable of these are held, and all this property returned back to the people. That is how Kenya will move forward. And that is the rallying call to the president, and I think he has been able to listen to us, and I hope he's going to act, because there is one thing to listen to the people of Kenya, and there is one thing to act on your word. So that is what I'm able to put forward as of now.
Exactly. Staying with you, Joshua, things we could draw from your contribution is, of course, the government will need to be more accountable, as well as reduce public spendings. Now, looking at moving forward, you earlier on started that a lot of things need to be taken into consideration. Now, let's focus. A few months ago, we saw the evolution of affordable housing projects in different counties like Mackenzie, Kandara, Muranga, and a host of others. But then, how would such projects, given that Kenya has an ailing economy at the moment, how would such projects actually impact the development of the country?
Okay. I'll put it plainly that these affordable housing projects, houses, have been a dream for, let's say, has been a process from way back, let's say 10 years. But now the introduction of housing levy was when now the government decided to use housing levy as a form of building these affordable housing, building these affordable houses. I think the government has been on the plan to reduce and especially cut down on having slums, especially in the city, and and of course have these affordable houses in rural areas. And you find that much as it's going to happen in other counties, the main question has been, why is it that I need to pay for housing levy in a county that is not even a city? It's in a rural area where people own their own lands, people have their own houses. And I think the government hasn't been prudent enough and try to highlight this plight, because it just wants to show off or just do these legacy projects, because the government sees these as a legacy project. It sees these as a form of employment to the people, because they say that the people who are coming to construct are the young people. The people who are coming to, let's say, the architects, the people who are going to build these houses are going to be young people. And it's trying to cut down on the rate of employment. But the question from we, the young Kenyans, are asking, we didn't go to university or something just to come focus on just building houses. There are many other opportunities that we want in the country. There's a great niche in agriculture, but now the government is trying to just focus on these legacy projects. And I can put it this way, that this is one of the white elephant projects. And the reason why you find that people are so raged, and the reason why they came out to the streets, because this housing levy on these affordable housing was the root cause of all these things. And I think the government needs to find a way of making it right, doing proper civic education, proper enlightening of people, because the masses know things that are going on in the country. And I can tell you for a fact that even the money that has been being collected by the Kenya Revenue Authority, that is the 1.5% of the housing levy, that money right now has been taken into infrastructure bonds. And now that money is no longer serving the purpose of building these houses, but rather it's been consolidated and taken into infrastructure bonds. And now the question is, why is much as the money is being collected, is it being appropriated in the right way? And that is the question we Kenyans are still asking today, because you just can't be collecting money from people and just channel it into other projects or something. It doesn't add up at all.
Thank you so much, Joshua. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is the Talking Points over your Pan-African channel, where today we ask the question, what is next for Kenya after President William Samoei Ruto of the East African nation came out on Wednesday to reject the bill and, of course, resent it back to Parliament, a finance bill that sparked protests across the East African nation since last year, one that has led to numerous deaths in the country. Of course, we're having guests on the show this afternoon, and of course, I'll take you back to you, Dr. Stanley FONGOD, in a bit to proceed the conversation. You listen to your co-panelists. And of course, we mentioned that the president has sent back the bill to Parliament. But what happens, because there is a decision, because the Parliament is expected to vote for, or rather say vote against, what happens if the Parliament or members of Parliament, MPs, do override President Ruto's suggestions?
Well, that's democracy, right? So we elected these men to the Congress, to whatever branch it is that's in Kenya. We elected them to Parliament. We did that, so that they can be able to represent us and represent our opinions. I think that, in more civilized, manner, we need to be able to hold those guys accountable. We need to be able to call them and say, look, listen, we elected you. You're coming from my district. You're from my province. You're from, my zone. You are representing me, and this is what we are looking for. This is what we want. So I think that the Kenyans need to be able to do that, if that's absolutely, what they're looking for. I also want us to understand, like, if you look at the country, I think, in all honesty, that there's a lot of money that's been collected. I think that, last year the government collected probably about $15 billion US, in tax revenue, about 15 billion. They underspent close to about 10 billion last year. I think based upon the World Bank, they spent close to about 10 billion last year, collected 15 billion. So there's supposed to be some kind of a surplus of about 5 billion, which is enough money to be able to take care, of her national debt, especially when it comes to, paying a huge portion, of the loan that they owe the international community or whoever bank, which bank they're borrowing from. The reasons why I bring this up is because I think that the notion that African countries, especially like Kenya, has to start trying to be able to copy models like what you see in England and in the United States, where we basically tax people so that we can be able to give our public services, that makes no sense, that doesn't work, that benefits no one. It's crazy. We need to be able, instead of taxing people to give people housing, instead of taxing people to be able to allow people to be able to live comfortably, we need to be able to lower the amount of taxes and actually more spur economic growth. That means you basically invest in the people, in young people, invest in the areas of agriculture, invest in the tech sector, and allow young people to be able to bring about economic growth. If the highest employer in any nation is the federal government, then that nation has a problem. But you have to allow the private sector to be able, all right, because the private sector is the only sector that knows how to make money. Economic growth literally is in the hands of the private sector, but the private sector cannot flourish if the public sector, which is basically the government, has frameworks and policies that inhibits, that restricts, that basically put a chokehold on the private sector from doing what the private sector does best, which is basically creating wealth and basically spreading economic growth and having some kind of a sustainable economic growth in the region. The moment you destroy the private sector, you also destroy your capacity for collecting taxes. It's a revolving door. If you basically say, you know what, I'm not going to invest in the private sector, then eventually you'll come to a place where the revenue you're collecting is not enough to be able to meet up, with your spending habits. And we also have to be able to make sure, and I think the young man speaks eloquently on that, we have to make sure that we do restrict, find ways to restrict the ability of the government to just talk about projects without having public opinion on the projects that they are actually trying to be able, to carry out in the country. They are foreign governments. They are foreign companies that comes in and connive with, those in power. I've seen this in some African countries, connive with those in power, and then have projects in the country that means nothing to anybody. Highways to nowhere. All right, trains that basically goes nowhere. Billions of US dollars being collected, and the country actually owes that money, how be it to the local citizens of these nations, that they have no clue what's going on. That you sit down some afternoon and then you just basically owe, as part of the collective in the particular nation, somebody just threw a $10,000 debt on your head as part of the collective, because you are part of that particular nation, and eventually somehow they'll come after you for taxes. Either they're taxing the business, that you buy from, and then you pay that taxes by going to buy things at a higher rate, as opposed to buying it at a lower rate at your convenience store, grocery store, wherever you shop. That is some of the things that we need to be able to address to make sure that the private sector basically has what it takes to be able to spur economic growth and allow young people to be more involved in this space and allow the ingenuity and the capacity for creating wealth and become young entrepreneurs rather than depending on the government, for job creation. The government can't create jobs. The government can only create an environment that allows entrepreneurs to prosper, and then in that be able to recruit young people coming out of universities to work for them, and why not young people start up their own businesses as they are doing in the tech sector and in agriculture.
Absolutely. And I recall just a few days ago, we saw Tanzania, where the government actually released its own budget for the year 2024-2025. And it stated that some of the key reforms in its budget could be investing in productive sectors like the private sector. And that is just a neighbor away from Kenya. Now, focusing on a topic of discussion, back to you, Joshua. You listened to the opinion of your co-panelists, but then Ruto recently mentioned that he has pledged so far to have a dialogue with the Kenyan youth. Now, being a youth and a citizen of Kenya, do you think that would work in quelling the tensions that are ongoing in the country?
I think I was muted. Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. Can you proceed?
The call from the president to, of course, find dialogue with the young people. It was a right move because it's the young people who started this movement. But now you find that this movement was very organic. It had no leader. It had no financiers. And you find that even the cause of all these abductions, even my friends who were abducted, they're being asked the question, who's financing you? Are you the leader? Who's the leader? So they're trying to piece up information to know really who's leading this movement. But I can tell you for a fact that literally these movements, these demonstrations had no leader. It was actually propagated by the young people themselves, the people who are tired. And just because it was being heightened, it was being highlighted by vocal people on various social media, people decided to come out. And one thing for sure is I can say that the president has a very huge problem right now with trying to have a dialogue with who, because who really is the leader of the youth? Because literally these young people don't care about parties. They don't care about your tribe, because what has been the thriving point in this country, it's politicians who think that they get votes because they come from a certain community, because there is a certain leader in a certain community who holds the voice of many, or who is able to take the people to, let's say, a negotiating table. The president finds himself in a very, very hot seat because there is no person who is going to negotiate with him. And the only way he's going to handle it is when he's going to listen to the plight of these young people. And I think we, the young people, have really stated, and we've stated clearly, that we are not going to allow anyone to try auction us in the name of is going to be our negotiator or something, because even we haven't had that conversation, because our main plight was taking down the finance bill. And if the government is not going to relent, then the president has to go home. Get it? So the only solution, the only approach the president has to get is to find a way of extending an olive branch by acting up and know that these people are very organic. They don't care about any party or anything, because majority of them don't subscribe to now the regime's party, that is the ruling party coalition fundamentals and things. These are just people. Personally, I can say I voted for this government, but you find me on the streets. You find me advocating for a better Kenya. So we can't say that there are people who are able to negotiate for us, because we believe that these negotiators are the people who have always been the most brutal traitors. So the government and the president needs to know that our plight, he knows our plight, he understands them. It's only that they've been overlooking it. They've been thinking that the young people don't think about politics. But jokes on him, politics is what governs us. So we are going to be involved in it. And what I can say for sure, much as the hosting the president until the next general elections in 2027 is not going to happen, what my rallying call to the young people is turn up and present yourself for the ballot, because the only way we are going to save ourselves from this mess is ourselves turning up to the ballot and of course have a representation of of many of us, so that we are able to vote for the people who share the same ideologies as us, because we don't subscribe to the ideology of politics. We don't subscribe to the ideologies of parties, of tribal politics and all sort of stuff, of nepotism. We don't subscribe to that kind of politics. And you find that the reason why the government never used to listen to the young people was because the young people never really turned up to vote in the past elections, especially these just ended elections in 2022. Majority of the young people didn't really register to vote and didn't turn up to vote. And you find that is the reason why the government really never took our keen interest at heart. Now that we've sparked this conversation, it is our high time that we keep the momentum going. It is us who are going to hold this government accountable. It is us who are going to take over this government and fill these positions. And of course, much as we've studied, we have this education, of course, we are able to steer this nation forward for us and for our generation. Yes, that is it.
Absolutely, and that is a clarion call for youths across the African continent to actively participate or get engaged in the affairs of their nations, especially in political affairs. Like they say, politics is a way of life. Now, moving forward with you, Dr. FONGOD, you listened to your co-panelists, and of course, with everything unfolding, what, in your opinion, is next for President William Ruto?
Well, I'm not too sure exactly where he goes from here, but I'm quite sure exactly what young people need to do. I think that across the continent, we find that a lot of young people are disenfranchised and they are more reactionary to things rather than basically moving forward and stating that this is exactly what we need to do and this is how we need to do it. So there is need, and I'm kind of excited. There's music to my ears, you know, listening to this young man speak as in relationship to what they need to do. It's not just about changing the government. Changing the government means nothing. It's not just about changing who is in parliament. That doesn't mean anything if you are not there. So we need to have young people who fully understand what is going on to be in position of leadership. Because, for example, if you're talking about not knowing exactly, you know, who borrowed money from where and what, if you are not in parliament, you will never know. If you are not in position of authority, you will never know. As long as you are on the street, without basically going for elections, participating in, you know, in the political process so that you can be elected and be in a place where you can fully be able to enact change, meaningful change, the reality is it will still be street talk. As long as we don't actually participate in the political process, things will be extremely quite difficult for there to be any kind of a legitimate, long-lasting change. We need to be in that position. I don't know what happens to Ruto. I have no idea where he goes from here, but I'm thinking that for someone like him, and because I understand exactly a little bit in relationship to what was happening, you know, so far as the policies that they were trying to enact on economic terms, I think they have to find a way to be able to address certain issues that, you know, the country is going through so that we don't have money just basically sipping out. Meanwhile, we keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Let's not keep, you know, allowing foreign companies to sip money out. Let's find a way in which we can be able to keep some of that money in Kenya. And then let us also allow young people to be able to tell us exactly what is it that they're looking for and be able to bring investments into their space. The reality is this, that any society that has basically built up a huge community that relies on the government, that particular society has failed. If you show up in California, California, you know, one of the largest states in the United States, if California was going to be a country, its high economy alone would be the 5th largest economy in the world, maybe about the 10th now. It would be I mean, just think about it. All the major tech companies are present here in California. But one of the sins of this particular state is the fact that there has these programs, this, you know, welfare program. It's actually a welfare state in which we just keep pumping in money. So you raise taxes on everybody else in the middle class. You know, it doesn't matter. You just keep raising taxes and then putting that, you know, pumping the money into all of these welfare programs. It does not work. The reality is we need to be able to find a way. And by the way, just so you know, if you're going to walk upon the streets of Los Angeles, you think that you are in some ridiculously, you know, dilapidated world country. That's how bad it is. They are 50,000 homeless people downtown Los Angeles alone. Talk less of places like San Francisco. It's crazy. Downtown Los Angeles, you have young people and old people with leprosy, something that you have not seen in 50 years, diseases that nobody has seen in 100 years. In California, it's back on the street because people literally live on the street, sleep on the concrete. It's a mess. Downtown Los Angeles is a mess. And because of what? Welfare state. The reality is we need to create an environment that allows people to be able to strive for higher ideals, where people basically can do things for themselves, okay, dream, have ambitions, work, do what it is that they need to do so that they can be able to provide for their family, not relying on the government to be able to provide them stuff. Once you do that, there are a few people in our society, in every generation, that has the capacity to create wealth. Allow them to be able to do so. They will carry the rest of us, along with them, that has the capacity to be able to work. And then in cases where there are folks who really can't do anything, then the government can be able to step in and actually take care of those. Maybe you're too sick to work, or you do not, you're handicapped or something. Then we understand that welfare in that regard. But once you start building a community of young people, vibrant, strong, smart, intelligent, folks who have been to school, who have ambitions to be able to live the life that they want, they have a desire and a vision to do what is it that they want to do with their lives. And then you convert them into a nanny state, into a state where you're telling young people you do not have the capacity to think for yourself. I will tell you how to think because I'm going to provide to you this welfare, this level of welfare. This is what you qualify for. What you do is you damper, you basically restrict, you destroy their ability, their minds, all right, from being able to do what is it that is natural to them. What that means is economic growth basically disappear. Folks who are supposed to create companies and hire others will not do so. Writers, inventors, all of these great minds basically just say, you know what, well, the government is giving us everything, so there's no reason for us to do anything. We need to create an environment that inspires young people, not treat them like infants.
Absolutely. Before I come back to you, so we can conclude today's conversation, Joshua, let me stay with you, Dr. FONGOD. In just a few words, we earlier mentioned on how to quell this issue of police brutality on the African continent. Before we come to the end of the program, how can African governments address this particular problem?
Police brutality in Africa, it's the same thing you find in the US. It's the same thing. I'm sure that one of the things you will notice is that almost everywhere in the world, there's an issue with, go online, watch videos, police brutality everywhere. We have a unique problem. But on the African continent, the problem is we really do not even have a judiciary that has proven, her worth to be able to hold those who have committed so gross violation, against their own citizens, accountable. And as a result of that, the person with the gun thinks that he's above the law. As a matter of fact, the person with the guns actually thinks that he is the law, not knowing that all he's doing is try to be able to represent the law, not even interpret the law. And so you have folks who will do whatever it takes, to exert such level of force, and at the expense of destroying, killing people, and doing whatever it is that they want to do just so that they can hold a couple of folks, in power because they have, the benefits that they get from them. We have to fight this sickness, on the African continent. Every police, every gendarme, every person in uniform must understand that they are Africans. They must understand that they are citizens of that nation first. You have neighbors, you have brothers, you have sisters, you have aunties, you have people you love, you have people who are dear to you. So are those that you're shooting. Whenever you point a gun at somebody else, remember that you're not just pointing the gun at one person, you're pointing the gun at a family, you're pointing the gun at a nation, you're pointing the gun at a potential leader, someone who was supposed to basically take your nation to a place of greatness and prominence, but you're pointing the gun at that person to protect someone who has not the best interest of the nations at heart. So we have to be able to make sure that we have that distinction. That's the issue we face on the African continent, but so far as I'm concerned, let us make sure that those who basically hold the barrel of the gun in the first place are qualified to do so. Maybe allowing folks who basically have a certain level of education, to basically carry our guns might be a very bad idea. Why don't we increase the salary of those who basically hold guns, and then, recruit those who have been to school and has the highest ideal on being able to protect the society, so that the whole entire cliche, which is basically has become a cliche, that the police your friend might just become true. Let the police truly becomes your friend. I should feel more comfortable when I see a policeman than be terrified by what they will do.
Thank you so much, Dr. FONGOD. To wrap up today's edition of the program, to you, Joshua, in a few words, what is the way forward for Kenya, given you on the ground and your experience of what's happening in that part of the African continent?
The way forward should be that, one, let the government just accept that it's been on the wrong and make things right. And we ask the president to fire the people who are around him, especially the cabinet. Those are the most incompetent people we've ever seen. He needs to fire his advisors, because he appointed people who are his allies during the campaign. So it was a form of reward. So we ask the president to own up and employ technocrats who really value the Kenyans. Secondly, I think because of the whole thing that has been happening, all the menace, let the police practice restraint. I mean, some of us are your children, we are your brothers, we are your sisters. You don't have to harm us. We don't have a problem with the police. We have a problem with the bad policies, and these bad policies also affect the police. So the police need to practice restraint. Let the government know that, just as it's enshrined in the Article 37 of the Constitution, that we have a right to picket, our right to protest, our right to demonstrate. Let us do so, and let the police lead us. Actually, let them protect us from these goons, because literally we are harmless and we don't have any problem. And the last thing, the youth, never forget what has happened. All the killings, it has been driven by this government, it has been steered by this president, all these abductions. Let us remember that up to the last day, we want a governable nation, we want a free nation, and we want an equitable nation. So as we do that, let's put our feet forward, let's put our hands in the dirty waters and do this for us. So we are only going to save this country when we are in those systems. So turn up and register as voters, and of course, do that risk that you are going to vie, and you're going to vie for the sake of the people of Kenya. So that is it from me. To post Kenyans and everybody around Africa, let's do it for us. So that is it from me.
It's all about doing it for the African continent. Thank you, Mansi, Faithfulness, Joshua, youth activist all the way from Kenya. Thank you, Mansi. Dr. Stanley FONGOD, for your insight, a Pan-Africanist and an economist, for your contribution on today's edition of the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's on that note that we shall be drawing down the curtains of today's edition of Talking Point over your Pan-African channel for you Media Africa. It was an insight on what's happening in Kenya, asking the question, what is next for the East African nation? Meanwhile, while we draw down the curtains of today's edition, we say do have a great day in company of our programs.